A shocking truth that shook the very foundations of all religious beliefs. In the past 150 years, archaeological excavations in the ancient Near East have uncovered a shocking secret. The most miraculous stories in the Bible may have been borrowed from older ancient civilizations. From the legendary creation of the universe to the classic tale of the Great Flood. All of them have original blockbuster films in the texts of the Sumerians, Assyrians, and Babylonians. The most remarkable point is the astonishing coincidence between the story of Noah and ancient epics like the Eridu Genesis and Keramis. Uncanny similarities. We must steadfastly uphold the entire foundation of faith that we have always believed in. Everything originates from a mysterious and ancient source far beyond our previous understanding. Uncovering the ancient inspiration behind the Garden of Eden story is truly no small challenge. The issue to clarify is, what is the true origin of this story? Are characters like Adam and Eve creations of Georges, or merely inheritances from ancient traditions? Why could a snake slither into the Garden of Eden and ruin God's plan? We will explore one of the most important stories in the Bible together, and explore its origins within the culture and civilization of the ancient Canaanite and Mesopotamian peoples. Elements such as the Garden of Eden, the Tree of Life, and the creation of humanity all had clear precedents from earlier times. In the stories and artworks of neighboring countries with richer cultural histories than Israel. According to biblical scholars Mario Kobel and John Hannah-Demas, even the story of Adam and the serpent is analyzed through the lens of their theory. There may also be a precedent in a lesser-known text from the ancient city of Ururid. If this theory is correct, it would be a major breakthrough in tracing the origins of belief. And myths are the very foundation that forms the Bible. The Bible records that when God began creating the heavens and the earth, there was not yet any wild shrub growing on the land. And no plant had yet sprung up, for the Lord had not sent rain upon the earth, nor was there anyone to till the ground. But from the ground suddenly sprang up a stream of water, soaking the entire earth, then gathering into a flowing current in the garden to the east, the Garden of Eden. And place the man you created within it. This story bears a striking resemblance to an ancient Sumerian myth about Enki and Ninhursag. The passage mentions an ancient land called Dilmun. Originally, Dilmun was a barren, desolate land with no water or life. Ninhursag, the goddess of Dilmun, pleaded with the god Enki to bestow the blessing of fertility. Enki listened and granted her wish, making fresh water springs gush from the earth. Dilmun was transformed into a fertile land where people could thrive. Enki also made the land more fertile by sowing his seeds, causing plants to sprout and flourish. These similarities remind us of the opening passages in the 2nd century book of Genesis. When the land was still parched, until a stream was dug to quench its thirst. Then the Lord planted more trees in the eastern garden. It is possible that the story of the land of Dilmun was the inspiration for the biblical narratives. Dilmun appears to be a real place, and many researchers believe it is the island of Paran, where a thriving commercial civilization once flourished thousands of years ago. However, in ancient texts, Dilmun was not merely an island but also depicted as a mythical land, perched on an eastern mountain, where dawn first breaks. The story in the Sumerian Eridu Genesis tells of the hero of the Battle of the Six, Sayushutra, the summer version of Noah. After miraculously surviving the Battle of Luk, the hero was taken to the land of Dilmun to enjoy an immortal life. In later stories, such as the Akkadian epic of Gilgamesh, the hero Luluk was also taken to a mythical land located beyond the mountain, the source of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Though the name Dilmun is no longer mentioned, these elements can be considered precursors to the Garden of Eden mentioned in the Bible. However, this connection remains a controversial topic in academia. Some scholars, such as Dynakad and Pernapado, argue that Dilmun is merely a faint analogy. Meanwhile, in the Garden of Gehenna, Arthros and Eleanorthros held the view that the two stories share more obvious similarities. Whichever viewpoint may be correct, one thing is certain: the story of the Garden of Eden contains many complex elements. This passage has appeared in the myths of neighboring cultures. Images such as the Garden of Eden, the Tree of Life, or the creation of humankind are all familiar concepts. Has long appeared in ancient tales. It's fascinating to witness how these stories take shape and evolve. And passed down through many civilizations, it is still recorded in the Bible to this day. In ancient mythology, the source of rivers often originates from high mountains. Water always flows from high places to low places. This makes it difficult to describe the 4 rivers originating from the Garden of Eden in the Bible. The passage mentions Bichun, Gihon, Tigris, and Euphrates, all intertwined with the image of a sacred mountain shrouded in mystery. The book of Ezekiel chapter 28 also contains a separate passage about the Garden of Eden. Passed down from ancient times, it is said that Eden rests upon a sacred mountain of God. Scholars Mario Kruppel and John Hanna de Mel argued in their research that placing Eden near where Noah's Ark came to rest is reasonable. On the peaks of the Adarak mountain range, located in the northeast of Israel. Even if the summer legend of Damel is considered part of the backdrop in the story of the Garden of Eden, there are still other folktales that feel more familiar and relatable. For example, in the tablets of Urarith, a crucial Canaanite city-state existed before the Israelites emerged. The passage mentions the sacred Mount Zaphon, home to a vineyard and the dwelling place of the god El, the supreme deity in Canaanite religion. This reminds us of the deity in the creation myth who made plants sprout from the earth, including the tree of life in the center of the garden, along with the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The tree of life is a familiar symbol, frequently appearing in ancient Mesopotamian art. Assyrian reliefs or cylinder seals often depict the image of a sacred tree. Usually, the date palm is guarded by hybrid creatures that are part human, part bird. According to scholar Helgashi, the tree of life motif in Assyrian art symbolizes the divine order safeguarded by the kings. The sacred tree played a vital role in the spiritual life of the ancient Canaanites. Most religious ceremonies are held at temples called pod or high place. They often lie on hills or elevated areas, where ancient trees stand tall, prominent against the landscape. And eating the fruit from the sacred tree is considered the most direct way to experience the divine. Beyond the story in Genesis, sacred trees in mythology are often associated with the Assyrian goddess. Assyria, also known as Atirith, is the female deity counterpart to the god Eo. The historical books of the Old Testament record that, because the worship of the Assyrian gods persisted in Judah, even within the very Temple of Jerusalem, until the reforms of King Hezekiah and Troja were implemented. Archaeological findings at multiple sites in Judea and Israel, it can be affirmed that Assyria is widely renowned and deeply associated with the symbol of the sacred tree. In the art of Anatolia and Syria, the guardian god Hadad often carries a tree branch or a sapling. Become a symbol of divine fertility, because you are the one who brings the rain, nourishing the plants on the earth. The story of the tree of life in the Garden of Eden. This is similar to a Greek myth. According to ancient Greek authors, the Hesperides nymphs were the guardians of the divine garden located at the westernmost edge of the world. This garden belongs to the goddess Hera. There stood a sacred tree that bore miraculous golden fruits, bestowed by the Creator to prevent the fairies from picking them at will. Here are the 2 translation options as requested. The name of the Leiden serpent seems to have a connection to Lothan. The cobra wearing a crown is a symbol in the cultures of the Canaanites, Syrians, and Hittites. This serpent appears in many passages of the Bible under the name Leviathan. Giacché defeated a sea dragon while shaping the world, although a direct link between these factors cannot yet be clearly established. But many believe that both the Israelites and the Greeks inherited symbols of the heavenly garden. The forbidden fruit tree and the serpent share the same origin from the Kandalm region. Although the answer to these problems is still not entirely clear, but it's easy to spot the striking similarities between these mythological traditions. One of the unique aspects of the Garden of Eden story is the presence of 2 special trees. The tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The tree of life grants immortality, while the tree of the knowledge of good and evil brings wisdom. Just as the name suggests. Although the characteristics of these trees differ from those of other mythical species in ancient legends, but their allure can still be found in other famous myths of Mesopotamia. For example, in the myth of Adapa, the king of Eridu was brought to the heavens, where he was offered the food and divine wine of the gods. This will make you immortal. However, the god Yer allowed Adaba to decline the invitation, letting him continue his life as an ordinary mortal. The innovation in Ja'at's version of the Garden of Eden story is the incorporation of the idea of a tree that bears forbidden fruit, with the belief that the food of the gods could grant immortality to anyone who partakes in it. From then on, the forbidden fruit that Eve ate also evokes the image of Pandora's box in Greek mythology. Pandora, just like Eve, was the first woman created. And like Eve, she brought suffering upon humanity by opening the forbidden box. Actually, it's just a pot. The tree of knowledge of good and evil can be seen as another version of Pandora's box. Moreover, the idea of creating humans from dust in Genesis is not a novel concept either. This is a familiar image found in many civilizations around the Mediterranean and Near East regions. The passage expresses the belief that humans are born from the land, deeply connected to nature and the world around them. In ancient mythology, there is a legend about the goddess Inanna. Recorded on clay tablets in Sumerian and Akkadian, after the world was created, the lesser gods were exhausted from the heavy tasks they had to undertake. They complained that they needed workers to do the job for them. And so, the god Enki entrusted the task to the goddess Nama, the mother deity. Nama mixed clay with the blood of the god Enki to create humankind. Those who will take on the tasks the gods no longer wish to perform. A newly discovered myth in the epic recounts the creation and the great flood of Atrahasis from Akkad. In this passage, the lesser gods also lamented the toil of farming, and once again Enki found a way to resolve it. This time, the mother goddess was instructed to mold humankind from clay, mixed with the holy blood of a slain god, along with the saliva of other deities. This is just like how Baruchas, a Babylonian tutor, did it. Living in the Hellenistic period, he described the process of human creation. According to him, the god Gengu beheaded himself, while the other gods caught the blood flowing from his wound, mixed with earth to form mankind. Through divine blood, humanity is granted wisdom and a share of the god's mystical power. The Greeks also adopted a similar legend. They believe that Bromtheos molded humankind from clay. Goddess Athena breathed life into her creation. The explanations here are very easy to understand. The clay dummies are arranged in shapes resembling humans, maybe crafted from lifeless matter, yet must contain a fragment of the god's essence. Blood is often what gives life. The story in Genesis also has a similar element, but instead of the blood of the gods, God breathed his breath into Adam, giving life to mankind. The interesting thing is comparing the similarities between how Gaia and Bromtheos created the first humans, like Eve and Pandora in Greek mythology, who brought calamity upon the world. Thanks to my own curiosity, it is evident that Greek mythology and the story of Aden share many striking similarities. Religious scholar Kem Bremer, in his research work on ancient Greek and Near Eastern beliefs, has pointed out the similarities between these cultures. He noted that both the Greeks and the Jews were influenced by and drew inspiration from the legends of the Near East. In an article published on Mythology Matters, scholar Arthur argues that the image of the serpent in the Garden of Eden's mind and God. Some other scholars have discovered a connection between this story and the serpent imagery in the Epic of Gilgamesh, a literary masterpiece of Babylonian civilization. In the story, Gilgamesh, after enduring countless trials, reached the heavenly Dilmun at the edge of the world in search of answers. Jonas bid him, the hero in the battle, to uncover the secret of immortality. Jonas Bidum led Gilgamesh to a miraculous tree growing at the bottom of the sea, a tree capable of granting immortality. However, just as Gilgamesh obtained the divine plant, a snake stealthily took it away and devoured it, then immediately shed its skin. It is precisely this ability to shed its skin that led the ancients to associate the snake with the symbol of immortality. The snake prevented Gilgamesh from achieving immortality, just as in the Eden story, where the serpent deceived Adam and Eve, keeping them from reaching the tree of life. The story of Gilgamesh shares many similarities with Adam. Although Adam and Eve do not appear, the tree of life and the cunning serpent are clearly present in it. Mario Copeo and John Hanademu, in their research, affirmed the value of the Epic of Gilgamesh in decoding the story of the Garden of Eden. However, they concluded that the story most closely related to Aden likely lies within the two Ururix tablets named KT-100 and KT-117. Although this perspective has not been widely recognized by academia, these maps are still incredibly remarkable and could change how we perceive Aden. KT-100 remains fairly intact but hard to interpret, while KT-117 is torn and difficult to grasp the content. These two tablets were discovered together in the ruins of Ururix, believed to be connected and likely part of the same story. KT-100 is often underestimated due to the misconception that it is merely a mantra used to treat snake bites. According to expert Ururix, Rirorio de Omelit, this is essentially a mythological text about magic and the power of incantations. The story begins with the plea of an unnamed goddess, referred to as the Child of Shabu, daughter of the azure sky and the fathomless sea, addressed to the supreme god El, also known as Elu in Ururix. El dwells at the confluence of two great rivers, perhaps the Turix and Ururix, along with the cosmic currents of the sky and the deep ocean, where this deity rules over a land bearing striking resemblance to Aden and Diamond. In this story, a snake invaded the territory and attacked a person or animal by biting. The goddess kept pleading for help from the Canaanite gods, Baal, Dagon, Anat, and many others, but none could slay the serpent. Finally, the goddess sought out Horonu, a lesser-known deity who held the power to command serpents and control poisons. Although not worshipped or offered sacrifices in Ururix, Horonu still receives reverence in many other places throughout the land of Canaan. The two cities in central Israel, Upper Beth Horon and Lower Beth Horon, were both named after this deity, suggesting that a temple dedicated to this god may have once existed here. The god Horonu was not only known in the land of Canaan but was also worshipped in Egypt. There, he was often confused with the god Horus and was symbolized by the image of a falcon. In that strange tale, Horonu came to aid the goddess. He journeyed to the Tarir River and uprooted a plant that carried death within it. Venom and saved the dove. This strange story leaves many people wondering, what is really going on? According to Kobal and Demu, Horonu is the serpent deity, and it is likely he who was behind the snake's attack in the garden. Horonu comes to the rescue. However, some other scholars argue that it was actually the goddess whose descendants were under threat. The role of the trees in this story is also highly debated. Kobal and Demu argue that it was a living plum tree which the snake poisoned with its venom, causing it to wither and die, forcing Horonu to uproot it. Some other scholars believe that Horonu only used tree branches as magic wands to detoxify snake bites. Every aspect of this myth is controversial, but there is one crucial parallel with the Garden of Eden story that we will revisit later. The second notable tablet, KT-117, depicts a scene taking place in the Vineyard of the Gods, regarded as analogous to the Garden of Eden in Ugaritic mythology. From the very first lines, though described rather faintly, a character named Adamu appears and seems to be attacked by a snake. At least that is how Kobal and Demu interpret this passage. A short while later, the snake's victim was identified as Shugazizu. As the venom drained his strength, he cried out for help to Shabu, the sun goddess. After a missing passage of text, Shabu calls Horonu to bind the snake. Horonu appears, neutralizes the venom, while Shabu dispels the evil mist shrouding the mountain. The ending was too heavily damaged, so no one could know the final fate of Adamu and Shugazizu. The appearance of the character Adam in the story of the Garden of Eden and the serpent is truly fascinating. Kapele and Demu believe that Adamu in this story is a deity, sent to the heavenly vineyard to rescue the tree of life from the venomous serpent, preventing the world from being poisoned. They also believe they have discovered additional carvings on the cylinder from Cyprus, depicting a scene of a three-headed snake attacking Adamu. However, convincing the academic community to reach a consensus is very difficult, as the remaining fragments of KT-117 do not mention trees or analyze Adamu's role in the story. However, the appearance of the character Adamu in the story of the Enchanted Garden along with the serpent is a noteworthy detail. Who is Adamu? Is there any basis to suggest that this figure is connected to the biblical Adam? Ancient texts from Urarith, Epla, Anatolia, and even Akab all mention a mysterious deity named Adama or Adamu, though the spelling varies slightly. In ancient texts, Adama is described as a goddess and the wife of Rashab, the deity who rules the underworld. Later in the regions of Anatolia and Urarith, Adama was often mentioned alongside the goddess Kababa, the deity who later transformed into Shubale, the mother goddess of the Friedra people. The gender of Adamu in Urarith, whether male, female, or non-binary, remains unclear, despite numerous theories about the character's origins. Earth also carries the meaning of. Essentially, this is a mythologized version of the goddess Adamu, similar to how the name of the Syro-Canaanite deity Resheph appears in the Bible with connotations of plague and destruction. This shows that even though Kopele and Dermu were mistaken in asserting that KT-117 was the direct origin of the Aden legend of the earth goddess Adama, then the traces of the ancient goddess Sirakananid may still lie hidden at the foundation of this story, and the name Adam, symbolizing both humanity and its connection to the earth, could very well originate from that very goddess. As seen, Mother Earth goddesses often play a central role in the creation myths of the Near East, where humans are shaped from clay. Life. Those raised in an environment of biblical and Christian theology often view the story of Adam solely through the lens of sin, human fragility, and failure. But few realize that the true failure in this story actually lies with heaven and earth, with creation itself. If you reread chapters 2 and 3 of Genesis while setting aside theological biases, you'll find that the story is actually a startling admission of the limits of patriarchal authority. He created a beautiful garden, but it needed someone to tend to it. So he molded a creature from clay, then breathed life into it to give it existence. However, the newly created man felt lonely, something his family had not anticipated. Meet everyone. Finally, God created Eve, a perfect companion for Adam. Garden of Eden not only failed in that regard. A cunning serpent slithered into its midst and tempted Eve to eat the forbidden fruit. It was the very traits God bestowed upon Eve, her curiosity and susceptibility to temptation, that made her unable to resist the allure of the forbidden fruit at the serpent's words. Then, Adam also ate the forbidden fruit, causing God's plan of creating humans to tend the garden to completely collapse. With no way left to salvage the situation, the family decided to expel Adam and Eve from the garden. If Adam's story carries any message, it is perhaps proof that even the plans of the Supreme Being can go terribly wrong. Not everything in this world is decided by the gods. When analyzing this story from that perspective, we recognize its astonishing similarity to the Eurydice myth inscribed on tablet KTU 1.100. According to scholar Eurytis de Omo, this text recounts a mythical story centered around magic. The passage emphasizes that, at the dawn of creation, magic existed as a force beyond the power of the gods, the beings who shaped and ruled the world. These gods were utterly powerless against the evil creatures. When a venomous snake slithered into the garden, they could do nothing to stop it. Only Haru, a deity of the underworld, has no dedicated temple for worship or significant place in Orthodox shrines. I just learned there are special spells to repel snakes and antidote venom from snake bites. Similar to the myth of Eurytis, it tells of the battle between Pahang and the sea dragon Loden. Loden is not a creation of Io, but exists as a primordial force of chaos, beyond the established order. Leviathan, the chaotic sea monster in the Bible, is depicted as an enemy to be vanquished in books such as Psalm chapter 74, Psalm chapter 89, and Isaiah chapter 27, no exception. It is a primal force, existing beyond the will of the homeland and defying the order that the homeland has established. The serpent in the Garden of Eden symbolizes that force of chaos, a threat of disorder that has existed since the dawn of history, one even the primal family could not withstand. The tree of life planted by our family in the garden, even it could bring effects contrary to our wishes. As explanation, the greatest difference between Israel. In the text KTU 1.10, Haru marries the sky goddess and presents her with snakes as wedding gifts. That gift harmonized heaven with the mortal world, bringing this primal magical power under the control of the gods. In Israel's theology, the proposed solution is to reject the use of magic. Del Olmo concluded that, in all cases, it is evident that this primitive two-way power system was relatively tightly integrated into the Uraridis religion. While acknowledging the independent power of magic, the Israelis deny it. However, over the centuries, magic persisted in religious rituals and became deeply ingrained in the Israelites' understanding of their origins and the moral world beyond. The origin and persistent existence of evil are affirmed through the presence of a primordial power structure. You can't simply attribute it to a single divine cause. In short, the search for a story completely identical to the Garden of Eden narrative in the Bible within the Near East remains a mystery. Kobel and Domo's hypothesis that the Ugarit tablets preserve the original, direct version of this story is truly fascinating. But it needs to be carefully examined until a more complete version of the text is found. However, most elements in this story have clear precedents, already established in the mythology of Israel's neighboring peoples. Adam's origin may be linked to the earth goddess Adama. The book of Genesis as we know it today was recorded after many centuries. Even after thousands of years compared to the earliest legends of Diomun. The story tells of shaping humans from clay, the tree of life, and serpents embodying enmity. The Israelites worshipped a single deity, distinct from the traditional polytheistic system of the Canaanites, prompting them to explore familiar stories through a fresh perspective. However, those myths have never truly faded away. The deeper we delve into the stories of the Bible, the more we realize that the ancient legends still endure, hidden beneath the veneer of the new monotheistic religion in Israel.